Welcome back to another episode of Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here by now. We love to dig into the stories that have shaped some of the most significant, successful people creating impact in this world. Today, I am so excited to have my good friend Steve Sims with us. He legitimately lives at a level and a frequency that most people cannot even imagine. He's done things that literally blow people's minds, like take private tours down to the Titanic and be literally having private dinners at the Statue of David with Andrea Bocelli actually performing. He pulls rabbits out of hats and does things in ways that gave him a nickname that, though he doesn't identify with it because it doesn't have the same authenticity and heart, he's the real Wizard of Oz in life in terms of the magic that he creates. But what's more than that is that he's a husband, he's a father, he's an incredible man. And what I really appreciate as I've gotten to know him is the heart that he leads with and the fact that he so vulnerably owns all the places that he's come from and had to go through to be able to get to the place in life that he's been building for a long time. We're going to jump in now. And Steve, brother, man, it's good to have you with us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, pal.
Well, I said a little bit about who I believe you to be, but I always like to reflect that back. Could you tell us who you are in your words, my friend?
No, it is true. I am amazing.
You are.
I hate those bios. Don't you hate it when you're sitting there and you've just got to stare at a screen and people just read out your highlights? Because no one ever turns around and goes, well, this guy screwed up at the age of 22 and he lost everything at 25 and then he got royally screwed over again at 20. No one ever puts the lowlights in, but it's the lowlights that actually allow us the highlights.
It's the only ones, man. And I love that, which is why I say that beyond whatever those accolades are, bro, it's the stories that you've got in your life that matter.
Oh, every single time. I would say if I was to sum myself up, I am an aggravated, curious 5-year-old. And I never want to stop.
Where's the aggravation come from?
Well, I think the aggravation is the fuel. You see, a lot of people want things, but will do nothing about it. But when you're aggravated, that creates the momentum. So for me, I want to be educated. I want to learn. I want to push my boundaries. You know, when I used to get someone into a restaurant when the restaurant was fully booked up, or when I would get someone backstage at the concert, these were like, whoa, that's great. But what can I do more? And then all of a sudden I got people turning up at your house to do a birthday party or getting you a piano lesson with Elton John or a drum lesson with Guns N' Roses. And then I'm like, that's great. But what can I do more? So it's that aggravation to see where my line is. And that's what 5-year-olds are. You know, they're always pushing. And you know, kids, you know, sometimes you love them, sometimes you don't, you know, but they're always pushing those boundaries and those buttons. And as I've got older, I want to see where my boundary is and where my button is. And every now and then you get close to it and you get a slap. And then you go, well, okay, then that burned my hand on the whole pot, but how can I get around that? You know, and then you just go on again. So that's what the curiosity is, makes you think. The aggravation is what makes you move.
I love that. You know, movement is really what matters, because that's what so many entrepreneurs and individuals really do, is they get stuck. They can't move, right? And I genuinely believe the things that keep us stuck are the things that we've not unpacked or processed and really have learned to actually face head on. Because to your point, it's those dark areas that actually provide the light. You had some really humble beginnings, and you know, you talk about it a lot in your book, Blue Fishing, and I know you've got some of the beginnings layered in this most recent book, Go for Stupid, which I've enjoyed listening to. But give us a little bit of context to where you came from, what your childhood was like, because even though you have the curiosity and aggravation of a 5-year-old to go do those things now, that wasn't always the case, and it wasn't necessarily the narratives that were ingrained in you.
No, I think, well, generationally, I came from a family where my family were the firstborn from people that came out of the war. So we were of the generation mindset of kind of like, you get a job, you work the job, and then you retire. You know, that was it, yeah. You know? And so as I was growing up at school, that curiosity as an entrepreneur, where they would go, well, look, the answer is one of these boxes. And you'll be like, well, hang on a minute. Why can't this be the answer? No. If you're not ticking one of those boxes, you're wrong. And all of a sudden, that kind of, how can that be? You know, we're being educated to surely find a fourth, fifth, sixth box, but I'm being told, you know, color within the lines. So there's that kind of thing that goes on. And of course, being a big lad and riding around on motorcycles and living in East London, it kind of made me look as though I was a very angry young man, but I was agitated and I was confused. Yeah. And of course, this didn't come out well, and I was very raw about how I would display my, again, not anger, but aggravation. And then I remember going to my college counselor on the last year of my school, and I sat outside her office just like about 30 of our other kids. And I walked into the office and she looked at me. She went, Sims, don't worry about college. Just get a job. Let the next one in. And that was it. That was my and I was like, oh, right. Okay. Am I wrong or are you wrong? You know, where's the problem? And I think it was that questioning which helped me. Some people, and you've already mentioned it, the settlers in this world that would go, oh, well, they know better than me. I better just get a job and, follow the rules. But the entrepreneur in me said, why not me? Why can't I do that? And, of course, I started questioning. And then there was a massive aha moment. My father owned a construction company. So straight away when I left school, there was no talking about it. I got one day off to sleep in, and then the following day was like, right, you want to build a site with me? And that was it. My life was now done. And I was on the building site with him, his brother, my uncle, his sons, my cousins, and then my granddad, who was knocking on 70-something. And I remember seeing my lifeline. This is where I am here, and that's where I'm going to end up.
Projected forward literally 2 generations.
Visually, I could see it. And so I went down to Granddad during the tea break time, and I remember running up to him, and he was a mammoth of a man. I said to him, Granddad, did you ever think you'd be doing this when you were this old? Now, of course, no one wants to hear that. You're working on a building site, it's pouring down with rain, you've got no money, you have to keep working. And he didn't even look at me. He just blew into his tea and he said, son, if you don't quit today, you'll be me tomorrow.
Wow. Holy shit, that's a line.
Yeah, that was massive. I quit there and then. My dad said I had to finish Friday because he was short-handed. My mum hated the fact. This was also one of my negative positives. And you get a lot of those. That kind of like...
Every time.
Something goes wrong, that's the negative. But then, hang on a minute, there's a real silver lining here. So it's your negative positive. And that's when I first learned. I quit my job because of Granddad. My dad backed me to go out and do something. Find your way. Challenge your way. But when I got home, you never piss off an Irish mum. My mum was literally kind of, oh, you think you're better than us. And that's what she said to me. And I was like, no, I don't think I'm better than you, but I think I'm better than this. Surely you would want me to try. Me and my mum, we haven't spoken for, I think, it's nearly 35 years.
I didn't know that, Steve.
Yeah. So that's one of those. There hasn't been a positive out of that one, but I have learned that sometimes those people that actually are trying to keep you down may be real close to you.
Well, they often are. And, what's really interesting, you dropped tons of bombs through that, and there's a lot of embedded wisdom in just what you articulated in your own experience. But there was 3 interactions that took place that stood out through that, and 2 of them were from people that many people would assume or believe or hope would have your best interest at heart, that would be trying to help guide, advise, and direct you, right? Yet you've got a college advisor that tells you should just go just go get a job. Like, it is what it is. Basically telling you, you're not going to make it here. I don't see you. I don't understand you. I don't connect with you. And you don't belong here is essentially the message, right? And then your mom, right, which is now Humble Homes and Beginnings, is on the other side of that saying, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, you literally in the conversation of one side hit both sides of shame, because it's I'm not worthy and I'm not good enough, or it's who the fuck do you think you are? And the problem is most people don't ever get to experience both sides with conscious awareness, and you did within the same period of life. So
in the same week.
How were you feeling all of that at that time? I mean, I'm sure your mind was racing, you're going into movement and action, you don't allow things to stop you, but like, how did that feel to have these 2 women in your life basically hit you on both sides and then be so centered with the wisdom of your grandfather with such a profound line, if you don't leave today, you'll be where I am tomorrow.
I remember sleeping that night very confused, as though I had missed something. And of course, as kids, when you don't get it, you think it's you. I must be too dumb. I don't understand. And then as you get older, you realize your mum doesn't understand. But in the early stages, I was like, well, hang on a minute. I don't have a job now because I've left that. My mum's kind of like angry. I've got to make some sunshine out of this. I've got to make something positive out of this so I can go, oh, we're all good. I made it, whatever that looks like. So I went off on a journey in the early stages to try and pacify my mum. And I remember very early on, I've got to make something of myself. I've got to be good here. I've got to show.
I got to show her that I can.
But it wasn't vicious.
No.
Sadly, it was defensive. Mm-hmm. It was a case of, well, my dad and my granddad have propelled me, but I've got to show my mum that it worked out right, And I remember, and this is weird as hell, I ended up having a contract with this little car company called Ferrari. And one of the deals of this group was that whenever I turned up anywhere, and I was living in Switzerland at the time, but whenever I turned up at a different country, I had to drive one of their cars. Pity me. But you know me, I ride motorcycles.
Dude, yeah.
I literally had no car until I got to wherever I was going. Then I had to drive this fancy car. So it was like being in a handmade suit that was 3 sizes too big for you. Even as good a quality as it was, it just didn't fit.
But I'm pretty sure I saw a picture of you in a handmade suit that looked like it was a couple sizes too big from you standing in front of that very Ferrari. So
yeah, you did. But I went down to see my mum with this Ferrari to show it off to my dad because he liked cars, and also to tell my mum, don't worry, mum, I made it, I did good, everything's great. And I told my dad about how I was in the connection business and I was in the people business, and I was making, we didn't have words for it. So we didn't know it was called a concierge. I was just Mr. Fix-It. I was, I know a man, I was that man. And when I told my family that, I'd just come back from Hong Kong, I was living in Bangkok, now I'm living in Geneva and I'm working with this, my dad was all, teary, was very happy with my life and how it was going. And he ran out to the garage to get a couple of beers. While he was gone, my mum came out of the kitchen and sat down and she went, you can tell me now, son, are you selling drugs? She literally, even then, could not believe what I was telling her. She was much happy to believe that I'd done it through some kind of illegal source. And you can't ever challenge ignorance. And sometimes, and it was that moment, up until that time, I'd wanted to please her. I'd wanted to show I'd made it. But at that moment, I went, I can't connect it. So Steve, where are you spending your energy? And I literally decided at that moment in time, not here, because I'm not getting it back. So how
old were you?
A few times. Oh, I was 20. I was in my late 20s.
In your late 20s when you said goodbye to your mom.
Yeah, and we've caught, I know when I was in Palm Beach and, I phoned a couple of times and tried to have a conversation, but she doesn't want to know.
Yeah. It's interesting because you are like a self-proclaimed, like rough, gruff motorcycle riding guy, right? And when I say self-proclaimed, that's just who the fuck you are. Like, you own it. Again, anybody who's not watching this on video who doesn't know Steve, like heavy earrings with beads, one on his eyebrow, and just looks rough and gruff. But I've also told you multiple times that I just also see behind all of that and see the giant warm heart that you have. But what I'm wondering is, how did you experience literally shifting from driving your motorcycle, wearing whatever attire you were for that, changing into this suit, and now going and driving a Ferrari? You literally, when you talk about the armor and protection, like that was armor and protection to hide all the shit that you still didn't want to admit about yourself, which you just fully own today. So talk about that divide, because I would imagine that the lack of congruence that existed for you even real time with your family when you went back to show them all of this, you also were like, but I'm just a motorcycle riding good dude.
Yeah, it was very weird. And you're right. You know, we purchased a fence, whether it be in a fancy car, a yacht, first class, whatever. We hide ourselves. Mm-hmm. And for years, I had been the kid that was trying to get somewhere that wasn't focusing on him, was focusing on where I was going. I didn't know where I was going, but I had never had my focus on me. I never cared how my hair looked. I never cared about, did I show up right? I would literally turn up to the richest people in the planet on an old motorcycle, crash helmet in my hand, throw it on the chair and go, right, how are we going to make you more interesting? Oh, you want to do that with Bocelli? Let's see what we can do. You know, so I was that guy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I started, and this was 8 years into my business. So I was pretty well connected to some powerful people when I got the Ferrari gig. You don't get the Ferrari gig if you're not connected.
That's right.
And I had that, and I was at an event telling someone about it, and this guy turned around to me, and again, I'm stood at this event, got an old-fashioned in my hand, black T-shirt, jeans. I turned up on a motorbike, was not riding the motorbike home because I was now drinking, and the guy turned around, he's like, oh, and you're doing this deal? And I was a part of the Monaco Grand Prix Ferrari parties. The single most requested party to go to with the most famous people on the planet. And this guy turned around to me and he went, you're going like that? And here's the dumb thing. I listened to a guy that wasn't even invited. And I changed. And you know the story. I got that doubt. And we've all walked into rooms and gone, oh my God, I don't deserve to be here. I better shut up and hide it back. You know, we've all had that self-doubt. And I went home that night in the cab and I'm like, shit, I better buy a big watch and I better buy fancy. And I did. And I went to this party down in Monaco, and there was a moment in this party that I'm leaning up against the bar with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. This was 1997, the 50th anniversary of Ferrari, okay? The biggest brand in the planet, with the A-list from kings and queens of royalty all over the planet. And I'm between Terminator and Rocky Rambo. So two of the biggest action stars of the time. And there was a picture that came out of it. I never actually kept the picture, which was a shame, but there was a photograph of me between these two guys. And I realized I'm not in that picture. This sellout is, this guy that's dressed up playing, mate, I'm not there. So I went home, I sold the car I had. I'd actually got a deal on a Ferrari. I sold that car. I still had a motorbike at the time, but I sold the car. I put the suits in the wardrobe, never did wear them again. I hopped the watch off, got rid of that pawn shop that day, and I decided I'm more important than to sell myself out. But it took that lesson to make me realize that I'm good enough.
Steve, again, so much depth in even what you just said. And I think it's really also beautiful how you've articulated in more than one period in your life, there was a singular moment that brought so much clarity to you that you went immediately into action. And that's something that's super unique, I think, for a lot of high performers. When I say it's unique, it's when we see something, we feel something, we know we need to do something with it, we take action and we move, right? Not everybody does that. And yet you did it very quickly. I mean, I see a picture and I directly get a reflection, pack up suits that night. They don't ever come back out, right? You've done this in multiple situations with your mom, with the counselor. You talked about it. When do you think your ability to just accept truth right in front of you and be able to reconcile between what is true and not, when did that ability get honed in for you? And when did you start listening to your voice?
I think as I was growing up, I didn't have Instagram to show me how inadequate my life was. So I used to communicate with people. And if I'm in the bar and I'm joking with the wrong guy, I found out about it, not because he messaged me on Facebook, but because he would punch me in the face. So I learned the ability to communicate from the streets. And I carried that going on. And I realized that in order to move, you've got to move quickly. Now, the death is when you stand still. If you stand still, you become stagnant, you stink, and you die. So momentum is everything. Now, trust me, I've got into relationships that I should never have got into. I've got into businesses I've met people, I've been in rooms that, oh my God, I was thankful I got out of. So that momentum has got me into that, but I continue to be that 5-year-old. Where can I go now? What can I get involved in? And as you get older, these start to get refined. But in the old days, I had nothing to lose. And Damon John wrote a book on it, The Power of Broke. I think when you don't have anything, that can sometimes be the best thing that ever happened to you. Yeah. And then when you suddenly get everything, it's like when a business is growing and you have no money. You think about your actions. You think about your movement to create the best impact for your business. If you get $1 million investment, you get lazy and you start buying an espresso machine. Things change. And
the seduction of success drops in pretty hard sometimes for people.
Massively. So I think with me, and Claire still says it, I'm a 55-year-old, 5-year-old.
Yep.
I've never stopped being that inquisitive kid. I want to know how. I've got a garage full of motorbikes. And on a Saturday and a Sunday, in fact, I just bought my first car in, I think, like 9 years. I bought a Bronco.
Just to tow your bikes.
Just to tow my bikes. Yeah, because Claire used to motivate me about stealing her.
As soon as I saw you put that post up, I was like, this motherfucker's buying this vehicle only to tow his bike so he can have a bigger trailer. Like, that's the only reason it exists.
Yeah. But I literally, so here's my mindset. So I'm looking at this car and it's got a V6 engine in it. And I'm thinking, well, okay, it's got a V6 engine in it, but, it's been subdued with, regulations and, whatever, catalytic converter. What can I do to this truck to make it better? Now, an intelligent person would be like, nothing. You know nothing about trucks. Stay the fuck away from it. But that's not my head. So I started spannering it, and I'm like, well, there's an air intake, and basic motorcycles exhaust and air intake, and then ECU and so I start pulling this engine apart and buying parts for this engine, and I put it on there, and it was really, really good until it wasn't. It's in the Ford garage now, just having a little bit repaired because I didn't do something right. Okay, but I got the knowledge of what I did wrong.
Yep.
And now my truck is a spanking beast. And my inquisitive nature allowed me to go in there. It's like, and I do this with Georgian stuff and my kids. I had a laptop, an Apple laptop that, was pretty old, and I was going to throw it away. I didn't throw it away. I took it into George and I went, George, get the screwdrivers and take that apart. And he's like, why? I went, you're going to get to see what's inside. Mm. Here's the remote control. Unscrew that. Here's an engine. Let's rip it apart. You may not be able to put it together again, but that inquisitive nature,
you learn a lot,
keeps the momentum going.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, dude, I've turned wrenches on cars with both my kids. We're constantly doing things, and though I'm not as hands-on in some of the ways that I want to be anymore, the reality of it is I still want them to know the fundamentals of the curiosity. My son's got a workbench outside. We buy him these things to build. We explore. And, what's really interesting is that there was a period in my life that I wouldn't have been able to allow that to happen as a father because of the level of perfectionism and control I was under. And I wasn't allowing myself to be in the moments to experience the curiosity and the fun, right? And in all the ways that you just seem to have flowing through you so authentically. In one responding word, what does the word no mean to you?
What?
In one responding word, what does the word no mean to you?
What?
Got it.
It's like I spoke to you in a foreign language. Mm-hmm. Because no, I can't answer in one word. But when you say no to me, in my head, I'm thinking, sorry, you don't understand the question I asked. So it is, I almost feel, I apologize that I didn't phrase the question right. So quite often when someone has said to me, and there's a tip here, which I'll give you in a second, but if someone's actually said no to me, I'll go, I'm sorry, Brian, I don't think I explained it right.
Yep.
And then I'm going again. And like that 5-year-old who wants the lollipop just before dinner, I'm going to keep going until I get the lollipop. But I noticed very, very early on, if you get a no from someone, ask yourself first off, can they say yes? Now, that's a weird thing to say, but if you go up to the valet boy at an Oscar party and go, hey, can I get into the party? Just because he stood there parking cars, he doesn't have the authority to say yes.
Yeah.
So you're asking either the wrong question or the wrong person.
Beautiful. And how did you learn the art of asking good questions? I've said for a long time that I'm only as good as my questions, right?
Oh,
and I love that you just said, look, when I asked this, you must not be understanding what I just asked you. The shift there is really powerful because you don't just accept it. So when did you learn that? When did you start cultivating that?
I learned to ask a good question by asking bad questions. And that's something that sadly a lot of people are scared to do today. You see, today we're in a woke, gotcha, cancel culture society. If I say something stupid, then you're suddenly going to boomerang you, shove it on TikTok, and raise a protest to cancel my career. That's what people like to do today, because poor, annoying people are very noisy. And those people that have time on their hands to write all the hatred are poor, annoying people. So you really got to focus on, okay, how do I get better at asking a question? By asking bad ones. So I would go up to people and go, oh, I want this. Can I have that? And then I'd realize it was all about me.
Yeah.
And I'm asking something to satisfy. It doesn't help you. So then I learned that if I went forward and went, hey, I know you're working on this and I can help you with this, but I'm looking at getting this. Would this work? Now I'm working at a win-win. So over the years, I've noticed from watching the reactions I get to the bad questions to help tweak me to ask a better question. And you're right, Jay Abraham always says that if you want a good answer, ask a good question.
And how did you learn to identify the proper person or the right person to ask the right question?
Again, by asking the wrong people. You know, I would always, I've never, ever, ever spoken to a manager. Whenever I've wanted celebrities, managers are there to get that commission. Okay? So whenever I was speaking to a manager, they weren't interested in what it was about, or who it was for, how it helped someone. Yeah. They were interested in would it make the payments on that boat. So I realized I'm asking, so I would always try to circumnavigate and try and find a person that A, has the ability to say yes, and B, and this is important, someone I can communicate with, not just shout a request at and then be barked a response and then shut. I don't want that kind of thing. I want to be able to sit down and go, hey, I've got this idea. And it's pretty out there. But bear with me a second. I'm thinking of doing this. And actually get them to buy into the dream. And the more powerful, and you know the people I deal with, they're powerful people that are earning most people's paycheck per hour just on their interest. You can't go to a rich person and talk to them about money. They don't care. Poor people care about money. Rich people care about value. So you've really got to focus on what conversation you're having to who in order to be able to perfect it. So I think today, and I will give everyone out there a tip, the next time you're in a coffee shop and you've gone up to the barista, you've ordered your coffee, and they all do the barista shuffle. They all step on over to where your coffee's being made. And of course, God forbid you can be in silence for 3 seconds. Everyone pulls their phone out and starts checking their emails while they're waiting for their Fapalapa or whatever. At that moment, strike up a conversation with the person next to you. You will be looked at as though you club seals for a pastime. People will just hate you for doing this, but we are losing the ability to communicate. And it's a muscle. And if we don't utilize it, everyone's out there going, oh, AI is going to take over our world. It's going to take yours over, but it ain't going to take mine.
Mine either.
So we've got to communicate and work that power of communication.
Yeah. Well, I think you're a phenomenal communicator. Even the way that you lead into asking a good question, you're setting preface, you're giving caveats and context, you're painting a picture, you're allowing the person to actually receive your intent before you ever even ask or discuss value, because you've created this safe, protected space for them. and you're facilitating it in a way that you can get positive communication. It's not through manipulation. I think that your energy and how you lead it, it's always through heart. And I think that that's what you've done very well always, is find a way to connect with people. I'm really curious, when did Claire come into your journey? How old were you guys? And tell us a little bit about your family and what they mean to you, because you are a big family man.
Yeah, I am. So Claire came up on my radar when I was 17 years old. She was stunning there. She's amazing and beautiful now. And she was way out of my league. I didn't even have a visa and a passport to get to where she was. And she had a mate that was luckily a little bit uglier. I
didn't know that was possible, Steve.
But it's always, they always say, if you look at your best friend, if she's pretty, then you're the ugly mate. So Claire had an uglier friend that would talk to me. And one day she was going out with someone and she went, "Oh, I'm going out with this guy. Can you double date with my mate?" And I was like, "Oh God, I hope you're not the pretty friend. So, who the hell's your mate?" And again, I was 17 years old. It was Claire. And I already knew her around the town. I'd already seen her. I had locked and loaded on this hot girl like 18 months prior to ever meeting her. And luckily, she saw me as a rough diamond and started getting involved and helping and sculpting me. And she's been my powerhouse, my foundation, my absolutely everything. And I'm not here, because of her. I'm here only because of her. So, yeah, she's pretty special to me. And my kids, yeah, I've got kids. I got 3 kids, and I often joke that it depends on what day of the week as to which 2 I like. The kids are there to push your buttons. And, they all go through funny periods. But I'm very proud of the strength of people they are, and I'm very proud that they are who they are. And that's something I'm quite happy about.
Yeah. When was the last time you bought Claire flowers?
I think that was probably about a year ago. I have a funny little thing here. For argument's sake, flowers die, okay? And I don't like to buy her gifts. And this has been a long-standing thing between her. And when I say long-standing, I'm on about, because I was with her, as I say, since 16 and 17. So we've been married forever, kind of since birth. I have never bought her a birthday present. Okay? Never. So what we do, because the first year, I forgot. Okay? And then the second year, I thought, I'm going to make this a thing. I'm not going to buy you something. I'm going to do something for you. So I always created memories. Last year, I actually, for her birthday, whisked her off to Big Bear. We had a log cabin in the snow hills of Big Bear, California. The year before that, I think she did a Porsche driving school. The year before that, I think she did tractor. She loves driving stuff. She did tractor training in Vegas at a brilliant place called Dig This, but I think it's actually cancelled now. Then one year, this is a funny one. One year she said to me, "Every year you do these things." And she's done parachute jumping. She's done gun shooting with Navy SEALs. I've got some good connections, so I always make sure there's good stuff she does. But one year she said to me, "I don't want to do anything on my birthday other than go for sushi. That's it. Don't do your fancy stuff. Just want to go for sushi." So I said to her, "Fine, you're the boss. Can I pick the sushi restaurant?" And she said, "Yes." That was stupid. For her birthday, we gave her an envelope which had the address of the sushi restaurant. And we said to her, "Have you ever heard of it?" She went, "No." And I said, "Well, that's good, because you got 6 hours before we were on the plane to Tokyo." So we actually took her to Tokyo for that sushi restaurant.
That's so amazing. I really love where you took that answer. I feel the same way often about flowers. In fact, one of the first flowers I bought Ashley was a stuffed flower. It was literally like a toy one that was permanent. And I gave it to her because I was like, and that's what I said to her when I first gave it to her. I said, you don't deserve a flower that's going to die and wilt. You get to deserve one that will live forever if you want it to. And so, my daughter now has that flower, and it reminds me of that time, and it's special. I buy her flowers now because she loves them, and I just surrender to the fact that even though they die, they put a smile on her face. So, but we are like you guys, actually. A lot of anniversaries and birthdays, we do experiences together. We don't buy gifts. We really never have. For us, it's about where and how do we connect deeper. I'm curious. I know how marriage is, and I know how I am with my partner. And as much as I like to think that I can get my way whenever I want, that's not always true, right? No doesn't exist in your world. When was a time that Claire said no, and she got her way, and how did that affect you?
Every single day.
Yes.
So for anyone that doesn't know me or can't see me through this, I'm 245 pound of ugly biker. My wife is 5'5", maybe 115 pound, and scares the shit out of me on a regular basis. So she's in a lot of control. But I think within relationships, the smartest thing you can do is to identify those boundaries and to go, well, look, if it's about the home, hey, that's you. If it's about the money, hey, that's you. If it's about this, hey, that's me, and understand those boundaries. Now, those boundaries will always be a bit fluid, but I think the important thing is to identify those boundaries so that you can work in harmony with each other. Now, every now and then I'll turn around and I'll go, I really like that motorbike. And she's very good. She'll be like, no, you're not having it because we need to do this, this, and this. But if you were to be able to do this, this, and this, and that, then maybe you could get another part for the ones you've already got. So she works with me like that. She knows how to control me. She knows full well that if she turns around, she goes, no, you can't.
You're going to do it anyway.
I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to resent her, and then it's going to create an argument. So she's become very articulate at handling me and letting me know when things can and can't be done. And again, that's what creates the harmony, because relationships are tough. Relationships are work. You don't just build it and then just lay back. It takes preening, it takes cutting, it takes splicing, it takes attention. But I think we've become very harmonious in how we actually respond to each other.
Yeah. It's beautiful how you describe boundaries, and so easy to look at it in light of a marriage, but you also extended it to this concept of relationships, right? And boundaries become extremely important in every area of life, including the relationship with yourself, business relationships, and how those have kind of patterned forward. I'm genuinely curious, right? I know that I didn't always have good boundaries, and that hurt me both in my marriage and in my business. Oh, you're taking the cardigan off? You were telling me I looked like the Backstreet Boys, and you're a biker wearing a cardigan. What's going on?
I know.
It wasn't congruent. I was trying to figure out what's going on.
I love the cardigan.
I wonder, when did you actually effectively understand where the boundaries were and the ones that you needed to set? And I'm going to say, more importantly, in business, outside of your personal relationship.
So the problem that every entrepreneur has in the planet is we think we can do everything, and we think we can do it alone, and that's usually where things go to shit. And I knew that there were certain things, certain conversations that I needed to have with myself that I wasn't having. Money, for an argument's sake. Money is a very destructive, negative bellwether to me. When I have shit tons in the account, I get lazy, and then I don't do anything. And then all of a sudden the money starts dwindling because of life. And then Claire turns around, she's like, we've got a mortgage. And I'm like, oh, shit. And then you jump up and you start taking on deals that you shouldn't touch with a barge pole. So I realized that I was reacting badly to money. So I got a financial team that looks after me, and Claire handles all the money. I can tell you 100% on all of my motorcycles, I have no idea how much money is in my bank account. And I haven't known how much has been in my bank account for maybe about 12 years, because I made the decision, I don't want to respond to whether or not I'm taking on this deal based on whether or not I need the money. Now, when you start working like that, you take on the right deals.
Well, you have attachments.
Exactly. So I realized, what do I react badly to? And then what is the igniter for that reaction? And then can someone else do it and get rid of it? So I love boundaries. Like the motorcycles, for argument's sake. We joke in our house that I've got a Tony. There's this guy called Tony. If he's listening, hey, Tony. He handles all of my motorbikes. And he handles them for when I'm racing, but he also handles them when I've had a Saturday wrenching away and I've torn a nut off their heads and he's got to rip the entire engine apart. But he's my boundary. He's my, hey, I can work here because my safety net is that I always know who I can pass it to. Now, I'm not going to be wrenching on that thing when I'm racing on a racing track. That's all him. And I'm not going to risk it. So again, I know my boundaries. So I do look at what I've done, and then I try to see what I can do less of by outsourcing as much as I can to then only leave what I'm really superior at and what my unicorn is. And I'm always pushing people to actually discover that unicorn.
You know, I don't know too many other people that perform at the level that you do that actually don't ever look at their bank account. It's interesting because the narrative in the world seems to be like, look at your money, look at where it flows, be intentional with everything. But I'm like you, I don't look at my bank account. I have not in like 15 years. I've known roughly where it's been at different periods. And obviously when I executed my buy, sell, and left my last business, I had to be prudent. So I've looked at it and I knew what was there. But largely, I started to understand the way that I would respond to money, what my relationship with money was. And I'm like you, if I don't know what's there, good or bad, I just operate in who I am, and then I can be congruent with that. It's whenever I've had those attachments. So the way that you talk about that is great, but you also just completely own that you are recognizing that it's not about what the narrative is out in the world and what anybody is telling you what the fuck to do or what you should do. You're realizing what responds or reacts for you and how do you actually activate yourself and keep yourself in motion. So largely what you teach is get to know who you are, right? Like know who you are, what you want, how you're moving through the world, and then how do you layer in the strategy and tactics to help you get there or close the gap in knowledge that you don't have that might keep you from being where you want to be as well. So you're very open in the way that you lead and guide people through. And I've just always witnessed you do this because you're heart-centered. And you have very deep relationships because you allow yourself to be vulnerable and to connect. What I'm curious about is, I know that you lost everything in your professional life after having perceived everything in the money side. Claire was with you during that time, right? How did that hit you? And what did you do to start to recalibrate you so that you could get back into your rhythm and build the life you now live in?
So everyone always thinks you lose it once. You lose it multiple times. It's just sometimes they're bigger than others. Sometimes you'll do something and you'll have someone do a project and you're paying $5,000 and they won't come through. So you lost $5,000, you'll do something else and you'll lose $500,000. So it's different levels of loss. But I've always been the person that doesn't like to lose. And for me not to lose, I've got to learn. So when I'm in a boxing match with someone and I get a smack on the nose, I didn't lose that fight. I just learned that my guard was poor. You know, when I'm going around on a motorcycle and I slip off the track, you know, I didn't lose that race. I just learned that I pushed the traction too far or I wasn't in a comfortable position. So I've always tried to learn. And this is probably, I'm going to give you a visual that I had, which really brought it home to me how my head was. I was very fortunate to be down at SpaceX when Elon was doing a lot of this testing with the fuel cells landing onto the floating pads. Do you remember those? Mm-hmm. Right. So we're in like this kind of Houston place. It's down in Hawthorne, just south of LA, where SpaceX is. And there's these big screens and there's all these monitors with all these numbers and graphs and stats going off. And everyone's looking at these computer screens and everything. I had no idea what was going on other than this middle screen that showed this rocket coming down. So it's gone from space, landing on something that's like a 25 by 25 foot floating platform. That's a success to even find the bloody thing, okay? But it landed, toppled, fell over, and exploded. And everyone at the back of the room, we all went, and we leant back and held our mouth. Everyone in the room leant into the problem to see where it had gone wrong, because it hadn't gone wrong from detaching. It hadn't gone wrong from location. It hadn't gone wrong from actually landing. It had gone wrong from stabilizing. So if you think about it, 3 of the things was a success, 1 of them was wrong. So if they can just tweak on that, they were 3 parts successful on that mission. But they lent in to get the education to be able to fix that last part. With me, anytime I ever did anything with money, anytime, you can throw a little pity party, you can sit there and go, oh my God, I've just lost $500,000. I learned very early on, and it's a classic statement, a problem shared is a problem halved. Babe, that college education fund that we had? Well, we don't have it anymore, so it was that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a few words, a couple of cracks of a whiskey, a bit of a moan, maybe a moody night in bed. But then the following day, it's like, all right, we've thrown the pity party. We even have balloons. Now what can we do about it? Where did it go wrong? Where, Steve Sims, did you cut? Now, a lot of the underlying theme of this conversation has been in communication.
Mm-hmm.
One of the toughest people to converse with, that a lot of people avoid doing it, is with yourself.
Bingo.
And I probably could be locked up if someone videoed me on a daily basis, because I'm riding down the road. I had a speaking gig in San Diego the other week. So of course, jump on the motorbike, and Claire's like, well, do you want to take the car? No way. Motorbike only. I can't play the radio. I can't have a cappuccino with it. I can't give you a lift. It's just me, my bike, and the engine, and me and my head in that helmet. And I'm not kidding you. I'm driving down the road, and I'm like, so what are we going to do about this, Steve? Well, I like this idea. No, that doesn't sound right. And I have a full-on conversation where I'm even answering myself. And I talk to myself a lot. And I want to know what goes on. So I talk to myself a lot. And in doing so, I get to see what I'm good at and I'm bad at. So when I make mistakes, because, hey, I'm the all-conquering entrepreneur, I thought I knew everything about Bitcoin, just anything like that, then you get to turn around to Claire and go, I don't. We just got educated on the fact that I know all about, these kind of things, and we go on. So I think in the early stages, you've got to ask yourself, do the wins outdo the losses? And of course, when you're 20s and you lose your money, and that's upset. But then the good thing about losing money is you had to have made it.
Yeah.
And so you go, well, okay, I made it. How did I lose it? The problem wasn't in me making it. The problem was in me doing stuff with it that I don't know what I'm doing. So let me do the beginning bit again and avoid the second bit. Mm-hmm. And then you fall into another mistake. And another. And then it goes. So you've just always got to make sure, are you learning or are you losing?
Yeah. It's a beautiful way to position that because, unfortunately, most people just become more aware of all the ways that they should be judging themselves, and they get stuck in that container because they can't look at themselves objectively and non-judgmentally, right? I believe so much that truly, you've got to be able to flip open your own lid and see what's risen to the top so you can be honest with yourself and stand in your own truth. And so your ability to do that objectively, non-judgmentally, but also forward-focused on what do I learn? That's always what I say. It doesn't matter what the fuck you've been through. It matters what lessons you could extract from it so you can become intentional moving forward. And that's just the truth. And so the way that you walk through that is great. I love the are you losing or are you learning? Because it puts someone into motion. And so for you, I'm very curious if you have learned consistently through failure and you are continuing to move, and lots of this had to happen as a result of the conversations you weren't having with yourself.
Yep.
What conversations aren't you having with yourself today?
I'm aware of what I went wrong with by not having those conversations. So I probably nattered to myself more than I should, because I realized that one of the biggest problems I had was not having everyone on board. And when I say everyone on board, I'm on about me, my abilities, my credibility, my insecurities, my doubt. We're like a one-person army. That if we can get us all singing the same tune, even, with different tempos, but we're a harmony, then we can move as such. So knowing that I was so bad at it in the beginning, I will often converse. I've got an event going on this weekend, about, and then I've got a speaking gig. I've got a challenge that's coming out soon. I've got a lot going on in my life. And as I openly said to you at the beginning, I'm very tired at the moment. Great problem to have, but I'm very tired. I walk around the garden with my dogs, talking to myself. Okay, you're tired, but is it because you're doing stuff that you don't have to do or that you're overseeing that you shouldn't be overseeing? And I then went back into my house and I wrote down all of the things that I was working on. And it was I think it was 37 item lines of what I was working on for over the next 6 weeks. 37. That's a lot of balls. And then I went, well, hang on a minute. Can Henry do that? Can Christy do that? Cossum's doing that. Connor's doing that. Tim's doing that. And I went through and I held accountable the people that were on it. Do you know I brought that list down to 2? Mm-hmm. 2 things that I had to focus on. Literally, I woke up this morning, I was like, I'm only going to look at 2 things. That's all I got to do. And so I got that from having that conversation with my dog.
But that's, again, there's so much depth in even what you just said, because what you're being honest with is the fact that when you can feel something, you give acknowledgement to the fact that you're feeling tired, off, slow, whatever the case may be for the day. And then you look at it through a lens of objectivity and non-judgment to say, well, what's going on with this? Is it something that's out of alignment for me? Am I doing stuff I shouldn't be doing? Where am I spending my time and my energy? So then you raise your level of awareness so that you can then target back and say, okay, well, what's the pattern I see in my life? And if I've learned this over these last 55 years as a 5-year-old that can be creative and aggravated, then what does that mean for me right now? Right? And what do I need to remove so I get back to that 5-year-old that allows me to just continue to be who Steve Sims is? And so you embed it just so subtly in the way you talk about it, but there's a lot of depth to the effort that goes into that. And it might not seem like that, but this is also the same difference because most people say that meditation is just sitting still. And I believe you meditate every time you get on a motorbike. You meditate when you go and you walk with your right? Meditation is about changing your state of consciousness or allowing yourself to get into a deep state of flow, as far as I believe. Sometimes that's done in stillness and silence. Other times it's done in movement. You are largely a movement meditation type guy. And so I just wanted to call that out because I think there's a lot of depth in what you do, but you would deliver it in such a way that's so accessible for people, which is why you always say, I've got this group of misfits that runs around me. And you do this in such a beautiful way. Now, the event you referenced is the Speakeasy. And I will personally endorse speakeasies. I've been to 2 of them so far, and I'm coming to this one next week. The way you curate events is unique completely. And you truly curate an experience that people connect at deeper levels, get access to people in places they might not otherwise. And you create a container that is so warm and inviting that people can actually come in there and get the help they need. And you're willing to offer it. You do this alongside Henry, and you have been mentoring, developing, and are now business partners with your son. I love witnessing the 2 of you do life together in such a big way. What's the benefit, do you believe, of integrating and aligning in business with your son?
Wow. I was with you up until the last statement. And the reason the last statement kind of lost me is because there's this pressure that, hey, if I'm going to go into business, keep it in the family. Your family may not be the right person for you to actually be in business with. So I never got in business with my son. I got in business with Henry Sims, who just happened to be related.
Beautiful separation. Thank you. Yes, keep going.
Okay. The attraction that we had in doing something together was that we were not compatible and aligned in so many different ways that each of us had a certain skill set that completed the pie. So I was like the front facing, hey, here's how you amplify, here's how you communicate, here's how you put your brand out, here's how you show up. And Henry's behind it going, well, here's how you do it in the digital world. Here's how you release the amount of conversations you have within creating a chalk, be able to control the narrative. And he was able to look at the digital, I was able to look at the physical. By marrying them both, in today's ecosystem, it became impossible to misunderstand. But I got in business with him because he was articulate and qualified in those bits. And what it wasn't, then either I could help him with, or we'd get someone else to bring it in.
Yeah. Well, and for those that don't know the backstory too, Henry didn't actually go into business right away with Steve.
Oh.
He was working for Steve and supporting Steve in lots of these efforts. And so this was mutually collaborated, mutually decided upon once you realized the complementary nature of what the relationship was. And so on
that note, funny enough, it was Claire again that was the actual conduit to that, because I would work on someone and then we needed something and I'd pass it to Henry. Henry was working on a client and he'd pass it to me. And then Claire, literally in the kitchen one day, when me and him were having coffee, she just turned around and she went, when are you two going to start realizing that you need to play together? And Henry, I think, was more concerned about me swallowing him up and him, sitting in my shadow, that he does what I do. He jumped on the motorbike and he went for a long ride, had that conversation in his helmet, came back and he went, let's do it. And so he had that conversation and it's worked very well. We bashed heads a few times, but again, we understand where those boundaries are.
Yeah, and the fact that you've also been able to give him the ability to see the rhythm that you've set for him, learn and integrate how to do life and business together is a beautiful thing. You say that time is your main challenge. I'd be curious your perspective on why and how does that affect you?
Time's everyone's main challenge. I can buy a yacht, I can buy a car, I can buy a new head of hair, but I can't buy any more time. So I think that curious kid in me and the lessons I've learned from some of the most powerful people in the planet is use your time to create the impact and the smiles that you can. So, hey, I like to sit on the beach and just just whistle and just get served a drink and just waste an hour because I'm in a position to be able to do it. But then there's other times there because of, okay, I'm on a plane, I got 3 hours, what can I pull out in those 3 hours on that plane? How can I take my plane ride and make it the most impactful 3 hours ever? So I think today we need to really look at time. And one big glaring proof of that was COVID. COVID came across, and I know you, I know me, and I know a lot of the people that we associate with went, excellent, I've got more time. I can actually focus on my family. I can focus on my business. I can focus on my trajectory. And there were other people in the planet, I like to call those people wankers, that would go onto Facebook and go, what can I binge watch on Netflix next? Well, how can I waste my life? And those weren't the people that I wanted to surround myself with. So you've only got time to a certain level, and we don't even know how much of it we've got. And I guarantee you, you are not going to be on your deathbed and get someone float down with the pretty wings and go, whoa, time out there, Brian. Do you remember COVID stole 2.5 years of your life? We're going to start the clock again and you're going to get those back.
Yep.
They're gone. If you wasted them, you're full. So I'm really protective of every second and every minute I get. And I really value my time.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. You're putting yourself in the present consistently, because that's the only thing you have control and focus over, and it's the only thing that's real. You are on stages at a very big level with lots of big names. You do things that are absolutely unbelievable, and you rattle a lot of people's minds because they can't imagine doing certain things at the level that you do. You're also an introvert. And so when you say like Henry was concerned he might fall into your shadow, you have this big external presence, though you are an introvert. How do you balance that in your life of all of the activity, interacting with other individuals, all the movement and motion, and still give yourself the ability to recharge so that you're not as tired as you were even coming in today?
The first thing, again, is to recognize what you're playing with and to have that conversation with yourself. The idiot is the introvert that thinks he can be an extrovert. No. You're an introvert, do what you need to do, and then recognize you need those moments. You need those switch-offs. You need those recharges. The good thing, I think, about introverts is that an introvert will move with more purpose than an extrovert. And you may think I play an extrovert very well, but I look at it like this. An extrovert will stand in the middle of a room and take their clothes off as long as they get everyone looking at them. They need to be the center of attention. There doesn't have to be any substance, any impact, any lesson. Hey, as long as I've got your attention, hey, that's good. I'm an extrovert. Look at me, clap. But an introvert will turn around and go, what's the point of me going to that event? What's the point of me going to that networking event? What's the point of me being on that stage? Will it help my books? Will it help my business? Will it help my relationships? It will. Then I'll do it. And once you've been able to analyze, yes, this works, then you adopt what you need to adopt and you work with what you work with to be able to achieve that. And then just make sure that you go back to understanding I'm an introvert and I'm going to need to recuperate. I will come back from my speakeasy of having a phenomenal few days with some exceptional people, and no one will be able to reach me for about 4 days. I'll tell you a funny story. Joe Polish asked me to keynote on his stage at the Genius Network event in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'd actually just landed that morning. There was a problem with the plane, so I was really worried that, I was going to miss my slot. So they put me into the afternoon. So I landed in the morning, didn't even get a chance to get into the hotel. Henry, put the bags and everything in there. I got ready, went on, did my thing. So I was already a little bit harassed from the plane, but I had to perform now. And I had to give everything. And I did this speech. And it was good. I know what I'm doing. I've spoken on stages all over the planet. This one felt good. And I was in a flow. And the reactions I was getting, and the ahs and the laughs and the woos were all coming at perfect time. So I knew I was on track. But when I finished that and I stepped off stage, someone had the back door of the conference center of the Biltmore Hotel open, and I could see where my hotel room. Now, Henry had already given me a key to my room, and I could see where my room was. So I thought, oh, well, I've done my bit. I need to go and lay down. I had a standing ovation, and Henry was in the audience, and they were calling me to come back up on stage. I was in my room laying down, recuperating, while they were they were like, where is he? Hey, Steve, back on stage. I wasn't around. I'd run away. So do understand what you're dealing with. Don't try to change it. And this is one thing that pisses me off. Being an introvert is not a problem. It's not something to be fixed.
Agree.
You are you. It's like saying you're blue or you're green. It doesn't matter. Okay?
Agreed.
Just know what you're dealing with and be prepared to have the conversations with you that makes you more effective.
Steve, I don't know any other better way to end this conversation, because that is the point. How do we get people back to who they are with the permission to recognize they don't need to be like anyone else, model anyone else. They just need to know who the fuck they are, know what they're dealing with, so that they can just move and live. And you literally embody that. Is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with? And please let them know where they can find you. I know you're all about simplicity with that, so it'll be easy, I'm sure.
I'm Steve D. Sims everywhere. D for dashing and only one M in Sims. SteveDSims.com or wherever you consume your media, Instagram, Facebook. Throw Steve D. Sims in there and you'll find me. What do I want to leave you with? I'm going to leave you with something I think would be poignant to your crowd that my dad actually said. And I will openly say, my dad, an Irish bricklayer, wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. But I remember one day we were walking through London and I was a kid. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, son, remember this. No one ever drowns by falling in the water. They drown by staying there. And then he walked off. And I was like, he's just been fucking taken over by a fortune cookie or something. Where the hell did that come from? And I literally had no idea. It wasn't in context. I wasn't going through anything. I was a young kid. But today, as entrepreneurs, we fall in a lot of water. We're going to stay there and drown, or we're going to get up.
Bingo. You heard it best from Steve. He knows what it's like to flip open the lid, look at himself objectively and non-judgmentally. And here's the reality. If you don't leave current places that you're stuck today, you may be there 50 years from now. The wisdom from his grandfather, the wisdom from his father that he just closed with. If you fall into the ocean and you can't swim, you're only going to drown if you stay there. But the reality of it is we cannot get stuck by the things that have happened to us in life. We've got to learn to get moved by what we can do with them. And Steve lives his life to show himself what's possible. The connection with himself allows him to connect with his family, with his kids, to see his son and his business partner as the same individual, but in two separate roles. And he understands how to respect healthy boundaries. When you can align with who you are, surround yourself with people that can backfill the deficiencies, you too can live the life that most people will look at in shock and awe. But it requires you to take a look inside. So don't forget, flip open your lid and scan your can.